Well, folks, I was bribed to review this sword here. I'm such a sellout. So what happened was one of my Patreon supporters asked me to review a budget Japanese sword, and he actually sent me the money to buy one, which I very much appreciate. Thank you. You know who you are. I do very much agree that I should review more budget priced swords. I tend more towards the mid or even high range because I just know what you get in that price class. But I want to give this a fair chance. In fact, I have tested it, and it's actually quite decent, I have to say, for the price. So this is made by Musashi. It's called a ninja sword. It's a Hollywood ninja sword. As far as I know, this sword like this in this particular way is a Hollywood invention. They didn't look like this. This is like a budget cutter for people who, don't have a whole lot of money to blow on a sword, but just want to have a bit of fun in their backyard, cutting water bottles into tatami mats, things like that. This is made of 1045 steel, or, well, I think that's what it is. You should probably take that with a grain of salt just in case, because I haven't found this particular one on Musashi's official website. I've just seen it on other websites stated as 1045, so I can't confirm it with certainty, but I'm pretty sure it is 1045 because that's generally considered a medium carbon steel. It is sometimes called high carbon steel, but the carbon content isn't terribly high at 0.45%. So this is essentially the low end of suitable steels for a sword, and it's through tempered. Traditionally made Japanese swords generally have a softer spine and a harder edge, so this is all the same hardness throughout. It's a pin full tang construction. You can see the two pegs, one here and one there. The wrap seems a little bit loose. I mean, nothing major, just not quite as tight as on a higher priced one, you might see. The usual thing, the menuki, is on the left side, which, as I've mentioned before, I don't like, because that way when you hold it, your fingers rest on it. It would be more comfortable to have it on the other side, but that's of course personal preference and all that, and it's very commonly done that way. The picture on Cult of Athena shows a satin finish on the blade, not this black here. Now I don't know if that's random, if you get either satin or black finish, or if they're just all black now. The guard and fittings seem pretty decent. Even after testing, the guard is still perfectly secure, so I don't feel any looseness in the parts here. Now, one thing I do notice is when moving it around, I don't know if you can hear that, but the tang shifts a little bit inside of the grip. So the grip could have been fitted more tightly. But again, in this price range, I mean, it's $60. There are only so many things you can expect for less than $100, and I will be mindful of that, of course. So as far as the tests are concerned, I tried tatami cutting, obviously, and that worked pretty well. In fact, better than I would have expected, because the edge at first, when I checked it, particularly with the nail test, it just slides off. So it seems like the edge wasn't completely apexed. In other words, the two surfaces of the blade don't actually meet. There's a bit of a gap in between, so it's not as sharp as it could be. But then again, on the other hand, because of the way this is ground, it looks like it's a convex grind from this line here. I think it's called the shinogi line. I'm not really that familiar with Japanese terms, but from here to the edge, this is all a single continuous convex grind, it looks like. So that lowers the resistance quite a bit as the blade goes through the target. So even if the very edge itself dulls a little bit, you still have pretty low friction here. So I do the paper test here as well. You can see Depends a little bit on how I hold it, but you can see it does cut. So that was interesting. It didn't feel quite as sharp at first, and I mean, it could be sharper. You know, by the standards of Japanese swords on the reproduction market, this could certainly be sharper, but it is adequate. Resharpening would be, a bit more work than usual if you wanted to maintain this. If you just wanted to do a flat micro bevel here, that would be the easiest way to do it, but you would see that. You would then have a line there. Of course, that would be different from the black finish, and you would clearly see that as a secondary bevel, which a lot of people don't like. If you wanted to sharpen this completely, I guess you would have to strip the finish, because if you wanted to polish the entire thing all the way up to that line, then this would all turn into a satin finish or mirror finish, depending on how much you would polish it, and then you would have a bit of the black left. So that's a drawback of the black finish, I suppose, but it looks really good, and I have to say I was quite surprised by how well it held up. So I did some cutting on wooden branches, nothing too extreme, no heavy duty chopping, just to see how it would hold up. And I don't see any wear on the finish at all, which is unusual, particularly in this price range. Normally, a black finish like this comes off pretty quickly, rubs off easily, but even on the edge, I don't see any wear on it at all. So that's pretty awesome, actually. And the blade did suffer a little bit from the chopping. You can see that right here. If you look, there is a bit of a bend. In general, Japanese swords, at least if they're traditionally made, have a tendency to bend more than European ones because they don't have the spring temper that European swords usually do. Straightening this is not difficult. Shut up, bird. What you want? You're a pretty one, though, aren't you? You wanted the attention and now you just buzz off, huh? Oh well. So I straightened it a little bit. This was literally just one movement. I didn't have to mess around with it much, and it's already far better. It's almost straight again. And that is simply a result of the relatively soft steel. 1045, as said, is not particularly hard. It is fairly tough. I mean, good luck trying to break this. You will bend it, but I don't see how this would break. But it can deform more easily. In fact, you can see that right here, there's some edge deformation. You can see where it bent. I can also feel some other rough spots on the edge where some rolling occurred on a microscopic level. So not severe, but you can notice it. In other words, this is not the kind of edge that would last very long, at least the very edge itself. As said, due to the way it's ground, it should still cut decently well, even when it's dulled. So that's a nice thing, but yeah, it's just not going to be as durable as something like 1095 high carbon steel or 5160. So you have to keep that in mind, and it will bend, but you can bend it back, of course. It's not that difficult. And so if this was a $300 sword or even $500 or more, I would very much have to criticize that. That kind of steel would be unacceptable for a $500 sword. But this is 60, so I can't complain about that at all. Now it'll still do what it's supposed to do. I wouldn't cut bamboo with this, but occasional tatami mats would be fine. Water bottles definitely would be fine, unless your technique is absolutely horrible. And the fit may not be perfect. You can see they're a little bit uneven here. No big deal really, but you can see things may be off a little bit here and there. It also depends on the quality control. Another one of these might be different. One thing that can also commonly happen in this price range is that the end cap loosens up here and has to be re-glued. This one is still tight, so not a problem here. And it handles quite well. It's really light. It feels like less than a kilogram, and balance is pretty close to the guard. Well, I guess considering the overall length, it's not that close, but it's light enough that it really feels very agile, and cutting is pretty easy with it. Here's the lacquered wooden scabbard. Very simple, but it fits the sword well. I don't see any flaws on it. It's got this breathing tube here at the end. At least according to the description, that's what it's supposed to be. I don't think that would work too well. You know, if I had to sit in a pond for a while waiting for my victim with nothing but this to breathe through, I don't think that would work too well. So either way, just a bit of a gimmick. So for $60, I can definitely recommend it. If you are on a tight budget, and these days who isn't, right? Then I would certainly suggest checking this out if you like Japanese swords. As said, this is a bit of a Hollywood thing, not historically accurate, but you know, just for fun, bit of light cutting, emphasis on light. I don't think you can reasonably expect much higher quality than this for $60. So if you want to check it out, specifications and link will be in the more info section down below. I hope you found the review helpful, and thanks for watching.